Sometimes, the life you bury comes back for you. And when it does, you face a choice: run from your past or redeem it. Sometimes, the past you try to bury doesn't stay buried. It waits, silent, until the day it comes knocking, demanding you face who you really are. The weight of a buried past. Elias Crowe wasn't just a man who buried his revolvers in the desert soil of New Mexico. He was a man who thought he had buried himself along with them. Each gunshot he had fired in his outlaw years carried ghosts, faces he remembered, towns that burned, debts that could never be repaid. So he buried the guns, believing if the steel was hidden, the sins would stay hidden too. But here's the truth. All of us have our buried guns. They may not be revolvers, but they're pieces of our past we're ashamed of, choices we regret, or identities we've tried to erase. We convince ourselves that if we push them deep enough into the ground, if we never look back, they'll disappear. Yet they don't. They wait. And every single one of us knows this weight. For some, it's the failed relationship you never forgave yourself for. For others, it's the betrayal you committed when fear spoke louder than integrity. Or maybe it's the dreams you abandoned, thinking it was too late to fight for them. You bury these guns because they're heavy, because carrying them makes you feel dangerous, like you'll hurt yourself or someone else. But burying them doesn't remove the past. It only teaches you to walk lighter, pretending you don't feel the soil shifting beneath your feet. Elias believed his peace came from distance, that if he separated himself from violence, if he cut ties with his past, he could finally rest. But peace built on avoidance is fragile. The weight doesn't vanish. It waits for the sound of hooves in the distance. Here's the lesson. Your past is not erased by burying it. Your past is redeemed by transforming it. And that's where Elias's story begins to mirror our own. The moment we stop running from the ghosts of who we used to be is the moment we find the strength to finally become who we're meant to be. When innocence comes knocking. This section uses the boy at Elias's barn door as both a story driver and a psychological metaphor for moments in life when we're forced to confront what we thought we left behind. When innocence comes knocking. On that blistering summer morning, Elias opened his barn door and found something he wasn't prepared for. A boy no older than 12, blood soaking his shirt, fear burning in his eyes. "They're coming," the boy whispered before collapsing in Elias's arms. That moment shattered the illusion of distance Elias had built around himself. It wasn't just a boy. It was life knocking violently on his door, saying, "You can't hide forever." And isn't that exactly what happens to us? You think you've escaped the battles of your past. You think you've outrun the old versions of yourself. Then something or someone comes knocking. It might be a challenge, a responsibility, a person who needs you, or even a small voice inside you that refuses to die. That's the boy at the door. It's innocence, vulnerability, the part of you that cannot defend itself without you stepping up. When Elias carried the boy inside, every muscle in his body screamed to walk away, to stay detached, to keep pretending. But the universe doesn't bring innocence to your doorstep so you can run. It brings it so you can finally confront the question, will you protect what's fragile, even when it costs you? Because here's the truth. There comes a moment in every life when you're asked to rise, not for yourself, but for someone or something that reminds you of your humanity. Maybe it's a child who looks to you for guidance. Maybe it's a cause you believe in. Maybe it's the broken, younger version of yourself that still aches to be healed. That's when innocence comes knocking, and your response to it defines you. Elias knew the weight of the boy's plea. "Don't send me back. Please." In that moment, the outlaw inside him, the one he thought he had killed, came face to face with something more powerful: responsibility. And responsibility is the enemy of avoidance. It drags you back into the fight, whether you like it or not. The lesson for us? You can spend years running from your past, but life will eventually place something fragile in your hands. And when it does, the question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether you'll answer. All right, now we step into section 3, the black vultures of life. This section turns the gang into a metaphor for the relentless forces of our past and the struggles that chase us when we least expect it. The black vultures of life. Through the dusty window of his cabin, Elias Crowe spotted it, a line of riders on the horizon, dust swirling like a storm behind them. And even before he saw their faces, he knew. The black vultures, men he once rode with, men who branded children like cattle, men who burned and pillaged with no remorse, men who now came not just for the boy, but for Elias too. He recognized them because he was once one of them. And here's where the story turns sharp for you and me. Every one of us has our own black vultures. They are the fears, the regrets, the addictions, the toxic people, the destructive habits that circle back into our lives, demanding our surrender. Maybe your vultures are the whispers of failure that tell you you're not enough. Maybe they're the people who remind you of your lowest mistakes. Or maybe they're the unhealthy cycles you thought you buried, but keep resurrecting. Anger, procrastination, envy, self-doubt. The black vultures always return. They wait until you've built some peace, until you've convinced yourself you're safe, and then, hooves in the distance, dust in the air, a reminder that you can't escape what you haven't faced. The boy's scarred shoulder told Elias everything he needed to know. The vultures had already marked him. They had claimed him as property, as future darkness in the making. And isn't that how life works, too? The forces you once ran with, the destructive choices, the compromises, try to lay claim on the next generation of you, on your future, on your potential. Elias clenched his jaw, torn between the oath he made to never touch a gun again and the reality staring him in the face. Because when the vultures ride back into your life, avoidance is no longer a strategy. Here's the insight. Your past will always send vultures after you. But those vultures don't just test your strength, they test your decision. Will you keep letting them dictate who you are, or will you finally turn and face them? For Elias, the riders weren't just enemies. They were mirrors, mirrors of who he once was. And facing them meant facing himself. That's why this story isn't just about outlaws and gangs. It's about us. About the moments when the black vultures of our own lives circle overhead, demanding we either run again or rise. Now, let's move to digging up the guns. This is the turning point where Elias, and by extension, all of us, reclaims the strength we thought was gone. Digging up the guns. The sound of hooves grew louder. The dust clouds swelled on the horizon. Elias felt it in his chest. The steady pounding of the riders was a drumbeat of the past, forcing its way back into his life. He walked into the desert heat, shovel in hand, toward the place where his revolvers lay buried. Every step felt like betrayal. He had promised himself he'd never go back to that life, that he would never touch steel again, that the outlaw in him had died the day he put those guns beneath the dirt. But the universe doesn't ask permission before placing responsibility in your hands. It simply says, rise or watch the innocent fall. When his shovel finally struck steel, Elias froze. For a moment, he just stared. Dust clung to the wood handles. Rust kissed the barrels. And yet, as he unearthed them, they gleamed under the desert sun like two old friends, waiting for his grip. He strapped them on, and the weight settled against his hips like an oath he thought he'd broken. Except this time, it wasn't an oath to violence. It was an oath to protect. And here's where Elias's story becomes our lesson. We all have guns we've buried. Not weapons, but strengths. A talent we abandoned because failure cut too deep. A voice we silenced because the world told us we weren't good enough. A fire inside us we smothered because responsibility or fear demanded we play small. But when life brings the vultures to your doorstep, when the people or problems you face threaten to destroy what matters most, those buried strengths must be dug up again. You don't dig them up to return to who you once were. You dig them up to fight for who you're becoming. That's the difference between regression and redemption. Regression drags you back into old cycles. Redemption takes your past power and reshapes it for a higher purpose. Elias didn't unearth his guns to ride with the vultures again. He unearthed them to stand between the boy and the men who branded him, to use the very tools of his shame as instruments of protection. And that's the lesson for us. Your past, no matter how broken, can be reshaped into a weapon for good. The things you buried in shame can become the very strengths that save you and others. Sometimes, the path to redemption isn't in staying buried. It's in digging deep. Now we enter into the concept of not anymore. Choosing redemption. The climactic moment where Elias transforms fear, pain, and past mistakes into decisive action and courage. Not anymore. Choosing redemption. The black vultures had crested the ridge. Their shadows stretched long across the desert, menacing and unyielding. The scarred giant at their front, the one who had haunted Elias's past, raised his voice, gravel grinding against the wind. "Crow, you got something that belongs to us." Elias's thumb brushed the worn handle of his Colt. He glanced back toward the boy, hiding in the barn doorway, eyes wide with terror. And in that moment, the decision crystallized. Not anymore. This wasn't just about survival. It was about redeeming a life that had already seen too much darkness. About proving that the past didn't get to dictate the future. About showing a frightened child that courage and protection exist, even in a world that seems all pain. He stepped into the scorching sun, boots crunching against the dry earth, revolvers poised. The riders spread, forming the familiar but deadly triangle of threat. But Elias didn't flinch. Every heartbeat, every breath, every scar on his body was a testament to lessons learned. That violence can be controlled and directed with purpose. That fear is not a stop sign. It's a compass pointing to where courage is needed. That redemption isn't given. It's claimed. The boy whispered from the barn, voice trembling. "They killed my mama, said I belong to them now." Elias clenched his jaw. The truth hit him. Peace had always been a lie. And blood, the injustice, the pain, the cruelty of the world, always comes calling. But the difference now? He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't the boy's age, powerless and alone. He was a man who had seen darkness and decided to stand in its path, not be consumed by it. The first shot rang out. It wasn't random. It was precise. A statement. A declaration. Each bullet fired wasn't for revenge. It was for justice, protection, and reclaiming what should never have been stolen. And as the sun blazed overhead, Elias realized something deeper. Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about standing in the light despite it. It's about saying to your fears, to your failures, to the people who tried to define you, not anymore. The boy's hand tightened on the barn door, but now it was a grip of hope, not terror. He had someone who would fight for him, someone who understood that the past doesn't get to claim the future, not if you choose otherwise. Elias Crowe had buried the outlaw once, but he had dug up something stronger, a man capable of standing for what is right, a guardian in a world ruled by chaos, a redeemer for the innocent. And in that desert, surrounded by dust, gunfire, and the echoes of a painful history, one truth became clear. Redemption is never found in running. It's found in standing firm, in fighting for what matters, and in telling the vultures of your life. Not anymore. Conclusion closing, standing in the light. Elias Crowe's story isn't just a tale of gunfights and outlaws. It's a reflection of the battles each of us face. The moments when the past resurfaces, when fear and trauma try to pull us back in old patterns, and when the world demands courage we thought we lost. From the dry soil of New Mexico to the desert heat and dust clouds on the horizon, Elias teaches us something universal. Our past may shape us, but it doesn't define us. The guns we bury, our talents, our courage, our integrity, can always be unearthed when life demands it. And sometimes, standing up for others is the moment that defines our redemption. When the black vultures rode in, Elias didn't just fight to protect a boy. He fought to reclaim his own honor, to prove that even a man with a shadowed past can choose light over darkness, protection over fear, action over despair. And that is the lesson for all of us. The people, the challenges, and the circumstances that threaten our peace are never bigger than the strength we've buried inside ourselves. The fire you thought was extinguished can always be reignited, not for revenge, but for purpose, justice, and the courage to do what is right. So, the next time life comes calling with dust clouds on the horizon, ask yourself, what have you buried that needs to rise? Which old strengths, skills, or values are waiting to be dug up so you can fight for what matters most? Elias Crowe chose redemption. He chose action. He chose to stand firm in the face of fear. And in that choice, he became more than a survivor. He became a guardian, a hero, a man finally free of the weight of his buried past. Remember this, not anymore isn't just words. It's a decision, a declaration, a turning point. And your turning point could start today. If this story inspired you, hit like, share it with someone who needs courage, and subscribe for more stories that show how ordinary people can find extraordinary strength in the toughest moments.